we start at the last weekend where we have Donald Trump leaving Canada in a huff, essentially straining our relationship with the G7, or I guess the G6, and not declaring war on Canada, though later in the week, the Department of Homeland Security talked about beefing up security on the northern border. This is, of course, came as a function of Donald Trump unilaterally imposing tariffs on steel and aluminum coming from Canada under his authority that is predicated on saying that Canada is a national security risk. This, of course, was sort of offensive to the Canadians because they have probably earned the right to believe that they have been enhancing U.S. security more than a risk to U.S. security. And I mean, let's just start there. We'll work our way to the summit in Singapore with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. So your take on the G6 or 7 or formerly 7 or maybe 8 if Donald Trump has his way.
Well, I mean, I think when we last spoke, we talked a bit about the tariffs, which had been imposed on this, fatuous rationale that these countries, including Canada, Mexico, the EU, were national security risks, and of course, that's completely ridiculous. They are our staunchest allies, national security allies. I mean, it's completely absurd. But, that was the rationale that they had to use because otherwise they would have to go through Congress, which really, that is the only exception that the White House can use to impose those tariffs without going through Congress. I mean, for the most part, the Congress has held on to its prerogatives in this, and that was the one exception that they gave. So naturally, Trump and his minions went out and used it improperly, in the most improper way you can imagine. I mean, there are a lot of countries you could say that they present a national security risk. China, for one, which, of course, Trump has used that as well, but then is giving them all kinds of concessions all of a sudden, and meanwhile using this excuse ridiculously for our allies. So he goes into this meeting over the past weekend, having already done that and creating this big problem. He showed up late. He, scheduled himself to leave early. He was flying over to Singapore, and basically just kind of flounced around the meeting, acting like an ass. Didn't bother to put his headphones on for one of the meetings, for some of the translations, and really kind of just, behaved, I shouldn't say erratically, he behaved very arrogantly toward our allies. Well, nonetheless, the allies tried. They did their best to kind of put on a happy face. They ended up, there was a lot of, apparently behind the scenes, a lot of Sturm und Drang trying to get to this, but they did come up with a communique, which they always try to do at the end of these sessions, and tried to ignore the fact that Trump was angling very, very strongly to get Russia back in the group. Despite the fact that Russia really doesn't belong in it anyway, because it's supposed to be the top economies of the world, and Russia's way down the list. But they allowed Russia in as sort of a courtesy, and then threw them out when they invaded Crimea. In any case, so all this is going on, but they managed to get this communique. They come, they take their pictures, and they're smiling, and they're doing this. And Trump, leaves and goes off to Singapore, and Justin Trudeau, where the meeting was taking place in Quebec, which is his base in Canada, and he, he in a very mild-mannered way gets up and says, hey, Trump didn't agree to take the tariffs off, by the way. He never said anything like that. And,
right.
And Trudeau gets up and says, hey, we're nice people, we're decent, we love the United States, but we're not going to be pushed around here, so we're going to retaliate. And Trump went ballistic and suddenly refused to sign the communique, had put on a big show on Twitter, and then his representatives, Peter Navarro, who's a lunatic from California, and Larry Kudlow, the TV economist, he's got running his economic council now, went on TV last Sunday morning and basically had temper tantrums. Navarro called Justin Trudeau. I said there's a special place in hell for Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister. And Kudlow said basically the same stuff. And they went nuts, apparently under instructions to go out and be strong. And this was just this, as he went into this meeting with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, this was the state of the American alliance. And I personally think, Sam, I don't know how you feel about this. You said it was strained. I think he may have actually, it's a rupture. I think it's beyond a strain. I think this is a very, very big moment in American and European and Canadian relations. Something very, very serious, I think, has happened here. This isn't normal. I mean, maybe they'll put things back together again and they'll work together, and if there's a real threat, everybody will put all this behind them. But it just struck me that this was so out of line, so incredibly arrogant on the part of Trump, him throwing his weight around there, partially just to look like, he had really big hands, if you know what I mean, going into this summit meeting with North Korea, and to use the allies in that way. Instead of saying, look, let's try and pull together here, let's say that you're behind me and we're going to work together and all this. What he did was use them as pawns, as part of his strategy to appear like a big man. And I don't know if that's really something that makes him an extremely untrustworthy ally. I mean, like the worst kind you can have. That's like, Russia, German pact kind of stuff, right? I mean, this is really, really ugly, and I think it's going to have serious ramifications. I really do.
Yeah, and let me just add this too, that there is a tendency for folks like us, and I think many Americans who are opposed to Trump, to assume like, well, the rest of the world is going to realize that Trump is an anomaly and we will revert back to the norm. But it is not hard at all to imagine that the most rational response to America electing Donald Trump is that America elected Donald Trump. And that even if we come back with let's say, the anti-Trump, put aside ideology for a moment and just say, a Barack Obama. It's very easy to see these leaders sitting across from Obama and Obama saying, Trump was an anomaly and, we want to get back to the normalcy. And they just go, well, that's all well and good, but how do we know that you're not going to have another Trump 7 years from now? I mean, this is the way that a country gets written off as being unstable when they elect someone like this. And there's been no accountability for Trump doing this. I mean, you didn't hear any cries, from Congress in any type of significant manner. But all right, Heather, we got to take a quick break. We'll be back with more. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio.